The number of women in corporate boardroom in South Africa remains low. New research from PwC indicates that little progress has been made in balancing gender representation in senior positions at top JSE-listed companies. Let's talk numbers now. There are currently 84 women in the JSE executive population, and only 8% of CEOs and CFOs are women. PwC's People and Organization Reward partner, Makhosazana Mabaso, joins us now to discuss this. Makhosazana, thank you for your time and good morning to you. Quite concerning to see those numbers. I can't believe we're still talking about this, even with the amount of work and the amount of awareness being raised, that there needs to be more women representation, particularly in boardrooms and JSE-listed companies. Why do you think that the rate to seeing this number increase is going at a slow pace?
Morning, Domelo, and morning, everyone. And it is quite concerning, and I think it's part of the reason why we decided that for this year we want to have an article that looks at recruitment, because that's one of the places where companies can make a change, where companies can move the dial. In terms of why has there been a slow progress in this regard, I think it's part and parcel of the implementation of strategies that companies have. So you can have a strategy, how do you implement it? And if you look at the article that we've written on the way forward, we also indicate that one of the things that companies need to consider is just having this as a KPI, because how do you hold someone accountable? Maybe include it as a KPI that they'll then track over a couple of years to make sure that we correct this.
Perhaps share with us some of the numbers and stats that you have found through your research, and just explain if the numbers are actually telling us that there could be a threat to the equality agenda here.
The numbers are definitely telling us that there could be a threat, and it's the reason why we said, in addition to just analyzing the profile of an executive director, we provide you with the stats and look at gender and say, this is what gender representation looks like from a JSE perspective. And you've mentioned now that if you look at, looking at the wider JSE, we're sitting at approximately 15% of executive directors that are female. And if you dive down into the detail, for CEOs, it's only 8%, and for CFOs, it's only 22%. So it's the reason why the reason we looked at what do we do, where can we make a change, and that's where we did a deep analysis into recruitment, like looking at new appointments from 2020 all the way up to June 2022, just so that we could see what can companies do positively or what can companies influence in order to move the dial and make sure that the numbers become a better representation.
Yeah, you spoke about recruitment, but what about retaining talented women? What are your stats telling us there in terms of companies being able or perhaps not being able to retain female talent?
It's actually an interesting and a disappointing fact, stats, Domelo, because one of the data analysis that we did this year, just to get a better understanding of the data that we're looking at, is that we looked at tenure. And in previous years, we just looked at it from a JSE perspective. And this year, we broke it down to females and males. And looking at that, we saw that looking at females, they generally stay with companies for anything between 1 to 5 years. Whereas if you look at males, they'd stay with companies for years ranging between 2 and 8 years. And for me, it spoke to succession planning. It spoke to culture of companies. Companies need to do better in terms of culture, and just making sure that the culture is conducive for women to succeed within their companies. And just when we launched the publication yesterday, one of the comments that came through, which I greatly resonated with, was that just transparency, because you can't just succession plan without indicating to the individual that you are succession planning, that you will be including them in this process. So just transparency from a company perspective and an employee perspective, because we also need to come to the front and say, this is what I expect of you, so that companies can cater for us.
Right. And just lastly, before I let you go, Makhosazana, any change, recommendation that you provide in this report as a form of intervention, how we can drive change and to see, that number in terms of female representation going up?
Well, the change will definitely come into the succession planning and making sure that whatever strategies companies put in place in terms of succession planning, they need to be smart. They need to be actionable. There's no point in putting something in place that you can't necessarily implement. The policies need to allow companies to implement the strategies in place. So I think it's time that companies take a step back and just look at the recruitment policies. Are they enabling of the strategies that they've put in place? Making sure that the policies are gender neutral. So for us, it's just looking at those things. And also, obviously, culture is a very important thing, and culture starts from the top. And if leadership appreciates that, if companies have a more diverse leadership team, then they will be more effective and more successful. So it's driving culture, it's improving our policies, and also making sure that our succession plans, or the company's succession plans, are smart.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to us about this. Quite important to see, the data, what it reveals just in terms of the rate with which women are not necessarily moving at a fast pace in JSE-listed companies. And that's, got to do with recruitment, amongst other things. PwC partner, Makhosazana Mabaso, thank you so much for this conversation. And with